All right, guys. Hey, how you doing? This is Mike Berner, the host of the Tycoonist, and with me, I have a very special guest, Aja Raden, New
Hi.
York Times best-selling author of the book Stoned, and her new book is just out this year, and we'll be talking all about that. By the way, links below in the description of this video, so you can go check that out. We'll be talking a lot more about that. Aja, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So we were just talking before we came on here today. You've just completed a big move from New Mexico down to California.
Yeah, I did right in time for fire season because I'm smart like that.
Yeah, yeah. So you're not gonna get smoked out, are you?
No, I actually grew up in Santa Barbara, so it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's when we get our fall color, all the reds and oranges.
Okay, I didn't know there was any kind of scenery down there during the fall, really.
No, it's fire, man.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that joke kind of went over my head right there. All right. So we uh we have a few things to talk about here, things I'd like to talk about. And where to begin? Because some viewers or people who follow my stuff may remember that I've talked about your books. I've mentioned them in the past. But first, before we get into that, I'd like to talk about you because I think you have a very interesting background. And I don't want to. I won't introduce you, so I'll let you introduce you. Let's start with the old standby. Tell me about yourself.
Oh, I hate that question. It's such a softball, and somehow I always swing and miss. I was just doing an interview yesterday, and they asked me that one, and I went, like, how do you get that one wrong?
You're a bit of a Renaissance woman, though. I think, you have an art school background, but you also have a background in the sciences.
Yeah,
And that's sort of unusual. How'd that come about?
well, how did that one come about? That one came about through bad behavior originally. I got expelled from the same high school twice for, I would say, satire that went over people's heads. But that wasn't the official reason. So when you apply to schools like MIT and Harvard and the University of Chicago, and they look at your transcript and they're like, good, expulsion twice from the same high school. How did you even do that? And you go, I know. It's impressive, right? They're like, no. You go, shit. And the school I wanted to go to, the University of Chicago, said, we'll take you, but we want to see you go to school for a year first and not burn the place down or drop out or commit any other acts of satire, as you put it.
Okay.
And I went, okay. And I had to go to one of the schools that would take me. And one of the schools that would take me was actually, after the Sorbonne, the second best art school in the world. And my mom was like, what's wrong with you? Just go there. That's actually a really good school. And you should be going to art school anyway. Why are you trying to go to a science school? And I said, I don't want to go to art school. I want to go to science school. And she was like, you're an idiot. Go to art school. You're going to end up an artist when you grow up anyway, or you wouldn't be committing acts of satire, you fool. And I said, that's not a real job. And she said, it's not a real high school career either, but we are where we are, Aja. Like, here we are. And so I went to the Art Institute of Chicago. And after a year, they said, all right, good job, I guess. We'll take you. And I said, I don't know you. I'm having a really good time here. They've advanced me 2 years, and I'm going to Europe with my class, and I'll talk to you guys later. And I stayed at the Art Institute for a while, and it was great. I know everything about art now. No, I'm just kidding.
A few things.
Yeah, I know a few things. I learned a lot, and I had a great time, and I only ate a few paint chips. And then eventually I went to the University of Chicago, And I had a great time there. Only had a few more paint chips, but they were radioactive. And went to Oxford, to Christchurch, had a great time there, rolled down the side of a overgrown amphitheater. That was actually a wonderful school. I learned a lot of history there, actually. I got a large part of my education. I learned a lot of history at all three schools, different kinds of history. But I learned a different way of studying history there than I did at the Art Institute or the University of Chicago. They teach it differently at Oxford. And eventually I just said, all right, I'm done with my formal education, and I still don't know what I do for a living. And I went to the Revere Academy, which is a classic goldsmithing school, which is basically where I learned to be a jeweler. They teach goldsmithing, silversmithing, diamond setting, fabrication, the whole thing straight through in the way it's taught in the guild system. And that's where I learned to be a jeweler. And then what do you do with an education in nuclear physics and art history and ancient history and goldsmithing, except go to Hollywood? And I moved to Los Angeles, and I started my career as a jewelry designer, because it was that or get a volcano lair at that point.
Right.
And there weren't any good ones on Zillow, and that was how I made that decision.
Right. I mean, now that you're a New York Times bestselling author, maybe there's a volcano layer on the list.
I've been looking. Yeah. If anybody has any leads on that.
All right. If anybody knows, if anybody watching this has a volcano layer, yes, for sure, yeah. For sure. Mm-hmm. So you became a jeweler. Mm-hmm. How long did you do that for?
Well, I went to Los Angeles and I started my own jewelry line, and I was phoning it in a little bit. I made a pretty good living, but in the first year, I mostly was hanging around with this 90-year-old gangster, literally, named Eddie the Hat. And we went to the racetrack all the time because I would get up at noon and listen to old stories about Frank Sinatra. And at one point, my mom said, you have to get a real job or you have to come home. And I was like, what are you talking about? I have a real job. I am a business owner, ma'am. And she was like, no, you hang around with that guy, Eddie the Hat, and you get up at noon. And just because you can pay your bills does not mean, I was in my early 20s at this point. She said, that's not a real job. Get a real job. And I said, what do you want me to do? Look in the newspaper under jewelry designer? She was like, that's a great idea. Do that and then call me back. So I did. And I said, there aren't any jobs for jewelry designers. I checked. And she said, well, keep looking. There's more than one newspaper. And eventually I found a company that was hiring someone to make vulcanized rubber molds, which is not a jewelry designer. But I did know how to do that. So just to make my mother happy, I agreed that I would apply for this job. And now these are in a large jewelry company that's going to make more than one item, which most of them do. They make a master copy of something in metal, and then they take these rubber sort of pads and press them together repeatedly, and then they use a large machine that crushes it and superheats it into a single rubber block. And then you use surgical tools to cut it apart carefully to remove what's inside and make something that injectable wax can be shot into, to make millions of injected wax copies of it. And that's how you cast 1 million wax duplicates of the original, for example, ring. And so I showed up and applied for this job. And I showed up 2 hours late in a cocktail dress on a tow truck because things happened and I was not that committed to getting this job. And this guy looked at me and went, "Really? You make rubber molds?" And I went, "Well, I can. Do you want to see me do it?" Because I had learned how to do this. And I said, "No, I'm a jewelry designer." And he said, "Oh, yeah, that makes more sense." And I said, "But you're not hiring jewelry designers." And he said, "Well, I was thinking about it. I was thinking about hiring an assistant." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, maybe. You want to try designing something?" And I said, "Yeah. What do you make here? Wedding rings?" And he said, "Yeah, but we want to make some jewelry. So look at here's, like a little catalog of our rings. So design some pendants, like do like 6 or 10 crosses that look like our rings and bring them back next week." And I said, "Okay." And that was how I got an assistant jewelry design job at a company called Takori, where over a few years I ended up not an assistant designer, and then head designer, and then the lead designer, and I ended up designing pretty much all of their jewelry. I designed their fine jewelry line and their bridal jewelry line, and then their cocktail jewelry line, basically everything they sell.
Oh, so you go from art school to history,
the Santa Ana racetrack,
right, to
with an
physics,
elderly gangster,
right, then to there, and now you've risen up the ranks at a jewelry company. So quite a varied life experience. How old are you at this point?
It's not
Not now, but at the stage of when you become the bigwig at the company.
As the head designer,
Yeah.
probably about 25, 20, yeah, 25, 26.
All right. So eventually, at some point, naturally, you start to think to yourself, you should write a book, or maybe someone else
Absolutely
suggested it.
not.
Someone else suggested it.
I got drunk at a birthday party in Paris, and someone dared me to write a book. And it started because I had just recently quit that job and sort of thrown a fit, and I had been the lead designer for a while, and I got in an argument with my boss, and he was like, "What do you want? You can't have a promotion. There's no more, like, you can't have my job. I own the company." And at this point, I don't even remember what we were fighting about, but we got in an argument and I quit, and I said, "I'm moving to London." And I moved to London a couple weeks later. And a friend of mine came through town on a book tour, my college roommate. And she said, "Come to my birthday party in Paris in a few weeks." And I said, "Okay." And everybody at the party was in publishing, like her, because she was an author. And the girl sitting next to me at the party had her hands, on her stomach. She was very pregnant. And she was wearing an engagement ring that I had designed a few years before. I didn't know her, but I recognized her ring. And I hadn't said anything about it, but I was like, "Oh yeah, that's one of mine." And when she asked me that evening, because this was one of those parties that goes on for a few days when you make everybody go to a city in a foreign country. And she said, "So I heard you design jewelry." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "What kind?" And I said, "Well, that kind." And she said, "You design engagement rings?" And I said, "Yeah, no, Cupcake, I designed your engagement ring." And she said, "Oh my God, really?" And I said, "Yeah, I was a really popular model, actually, for a couple of years ago." And she was like, "I got married a couple of years ago." And I was like, "I know." And she was like, Stephen, she designed my engagement ring. And the man sitting across from me was her husband. And I was like, oh yeah, I did his wedding ring too. And Stephen, her husband, was my friend's book agent. And he wanted to know if it was, and I quote, a good one. And he meant the diamond, which is what everybody wants to know when they find out you know anything about jewelry. They start asking you about prices and about diamonds. And I was very drunk, and so was everyone else, really, except the pregnant lady, whose name is Jess, and she's very nice. And I was like, yeah, it's fucking great, man. And he was like, what? It's not? And I was like, no, it's good. It's really good. Like, what do you want me to do? Take out a loop and look at it? We're in a dark basement bar in the middle of the night. And he was like, what's wrong with it? Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. What's wrong with it? And I was like, nothing. It's really good. And he wouldn't stop hammering me about, tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. And finally I said, you want to know the truth? The truth is they're all exactly the same and none of them are worth anything. And he was like, what?
I think it's probably my favorite story in your book is how basically diamonds are bullshit to, in short. I definitely want to talk about that. But as far as your book goes, it's kind of a series of historical stories, right? And my understanding is the way you wrote it was really you recorded yourself talking about it and then transcribed it.
Well,
or was it something like that?
The answer to that question is in the end of that story. We got to talking about just that diamonds are a positional good and it's all imaginary value and controlled by diamond cartels and advertising agencies. And at one point he stopped me and he said, hey, Laura, the birthday girl, can she write? She should write a book. And that was how it all sort of started. And Laura was like, I don't know. Yeah, she should, but I don't know if she can write. I don't even know if she can read, because she was my roommate at the University of Chicago and I was doing math. And I said, I don't want to write a book. That sounds terrible. I don't even want to read a book. And again, I was very overserved. I was not a writer. I did not see myself as a writer. I didn't go out of my way to write things. I had never thought someday I'll write a book. That was not on my, imaginary aspirational to-do list at all. Not even. I wing it when I go to the grocery store because I don't want to write a grocery list. That seems like extra work. And I am all about not doing extra work. So
very efficient. Okay.
Yeah. Why would I do that? So they talked me into it / goaded me into it / they're both really good friends and they, kind of dared me, knew which buttons to push, and were also very supportive. But I had no idea how to write a book and I had no idea how to write an outline. But I've always been a really good talker. So a lot of how I did it, I just sort of made up for myself. And again, typing is extra work. Why would you do that when it turns out there's a feature on your iPhone that will type for you if you talk into it? And when I would sit down and look at a blank page, I had no idea what I wanted to say. But I found it much easier to answer questions people asked me. Like, well, you know a lot about diamonds. You have no trouble telling people these stories. Why do you have a hard time when you look at a page? So I just pushed record and I started telling myself stories about things and then emailing it and editing it, going, well, I don't need this part. I'm going to move this part. That was how I sort of figured out how to write a book for myself.
I mean, I think my personal opinion here, I think it turned out pretty well, right? I mean, it's a very conversational style. I mean, when I first picked up your book, back whenever that came out, it was a few years ago, or rather when I first came across it. And I just found it, in many ways, kind of a breath of fresh air, right? I mean, because a lot of people don't write like that. They don't write how they speak. And I mean, to me, it's kind of been a little bit of an inspiration because, I mean, the way I write, and people who follow me will know this. I mean, I try to make it as conversational as possible. So, hey, if you're listening to this and you follow me, definitely, again, this is why I wanted to have Aja on, because her writing is, I mean, it's very conversational. I think anybody who follows me would really enjoy what you've put out. But so let's talk a little bit more about your first book. Very cheeky title. I think that's what caught my attention. What's the title of your first book?
Stoned.
Yes. And we're not talking about that kind of stone. We're talking about the other kind of stone.
That was my favorite bad review I got. It was an Amazon review.
Really? Somebody mentioned that?
I didn't really get any bad reviews, but I'm like everyone, I got some bad Amazon reviews just from people who read it. And my friend Laura, who's a very successful writer, the first thing she said the day it came out was, don't read any reviews. Don't read the reviews. Just don't. Just shut your laptop. And I was like, why? Are they going to be really bad? She was like, everybody gets bad reviews and they're just stupid and don't read any of them. And I did anyway. And, but I loved this one on Amazon so much because the guy said, this is the worst book I've ever read. I can't believe I bought it. I want my money back. I'm at like page 82 and she still hasn't even mentioned marijuana.
Wow.
And I could not help myself. I actually had to respond. I was like, dude, how high were you when you bought this book? It has a big emerald on the cover.
Right.
You made it to page 82 and you still think it might be about drugs?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah. Eventually, maybe you figured it out.
How? I know I talk about like a Renaissance drug war in the first chapter, but you made it all the way through the chapter about diamonds and like, you're still waiting for the big reveal that this book's about marijuana?
Yeah, maybe it's all just the preface.
Jesus, man.
Yeah.
That's another level of high. I'm impressed. Impressed you can type.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
my favorite review I ever got.
I mean, sometimes I always kind of save some of the insults that I get on my own stuff. I have a folder of screenshots of some of the better ones. I figure like one day I'm gonna break that out because I do think it's amusing.
I got glowing reviews in like the New York Times, but that's the one I really loved.
Right. It's always the bad ones that kind of stick out a little bit sometimes.
Somebody bothered to write that. Amazing.
Right. So the rest of the title of the book, I mean, jewelry is even in the title, so I don't know how he missed that.
Come on.
Right.
How high was he?
Yeah. I mean, out of his mind, but maybe more than marijuana, if we're being honest.
What else are you on?
Yeah, definitely something. But the book is titled Jewelry, Obsession, and the Desire, and How Desire Shapes the World. So, I mean, while the book is about jewelry, you tell plenty of stories about jewelry. I think what you say is it's really a book about desire. So what is it about jewelry that people are so gaga over, right? I mean, you have a lot of stories about various necklaces and other jewelry that people have fought over the centuries. What is it about jewelry that people are drawn to? I mean, is it something intrinsic to human nature?
I'm not even sure jewelry was the right word for it. one chapter was about a giant emerald and
Precious gems, right?
yeah, treasures really.
Right.
There was a chapter about the Fabergé eggs. It was about, yeah, treasures really. So what is it about it?
Is it just the scarcity value? I mean, you do talk about,
what is it about this stuff that makes people act so weird?
Right. I mean, scarcity creates value, right? But
you just asked me a question that I spent 370 pages answering.
Right. Well, what's the reader? Okay, so what's the Reader's Digest version? I mean, because I think you've talked about how
that is what the book's about.
Right.
What is it about beautiful, precious things that makes people act like freaks?
Right.
That's why I called it Stoned.
Right. I mean, is there something that's, intrinsic to human nature? I mean, because I'm not sure if you mentioned this in the book.
Human nature, human psychology,
right.
Human biology.
You did mention in an interview that there's something about how people are attracted, and there's been studies on this about people are attracted to things that sparkle. Because it has a connection to water. I mean, what's that about? What's that about?
Yeah, when you see, it's more than just sparkles. Right in the first few pages, I mentioned that when you see something beautiful, and it could be anything beautiful, whether it's a beautiful shiny gem or it's a well-designed piece of furniture or a really pretty face or anything, when you see something that registers as pretty, the part of your brain that would light up on an MRI, were we looking at it that through one, is not pleasure centers. It's not your frontal cortex where you're thinking, wow, that's pretty. It's your motor cortex, which is surprising, or at least it was surprising to the people who realized it when they did this study. It's your motor cortex. It's the part that controls your ability to reach out and grab, basically. When you see something beautiful, your brain goes, do this. You literally are programmed to reach out and touch or grab things that are pretty, which is kind of a remarkable fact. Any kind of pretty. And then you were asking about sparkles. So diamonds aren't sparkly. When you find them in alluvial deposits, that means on the surface, no diamond mines involved, which is how they occur normally. They wash up in riverbeds and things. They don't even look like broken glass. They just look like pebbles. We made them sparkly, actually, by cutting them like that. Otherwise, they just look like sort of dirty, clear rocks. And but when you see those sparkles, it actually it drives you in that way that when you're walking down the street and you walk past a jewelry store and you see those sparkles, everybody stops. Even if you didn't want a diamond or you're not interested in diamonds, next time you're in a city, stand near one of those windows and just watch for a minute. Everybody, if they don't stop and look, they still look. They go like this. Their head turns, they glance, everybody looks.
Right. Go ahead.
They can't help it. It's a normal response. And it's the sparkles on the diamonds. It's why people put flashing lights over things they want you to look at. And what happened is we've been evolving for as long as we've been evolving to look for something that we can't live without, which is water. Nobody can live without water. Nothing can live. Before we were people, before we were primates, back when we were, little creepy crawlies, we still were looking for water. It's one of our primary drives. And what water looks like to us is sparkles. It looks shiny, it looks sparkly. And so when you see sparkles, you think, I have to have that. Go toward the sparkles. That's why everybody's head snaps around when they walk past a window full of diamonds.
Right. I think one of the best, or one of my favorite fun facts in your book is how you mentioned there's actually been eye tracking studies where people, it's been proven that people tend to linger on
other people's jewelry.
Correct. Right.
More
right.
than on a woman wearing a diamond necklace over her cleavage. You think people are looking at her breasts, and they are, more than they're looking at her face, but not as much as they're looking at her necklace. Eye tracking does not lie. It really, it's a computer tracking where people's eyes are.
Right. And people are searching for signifiers of status, right? What is it about that, what's up with that? Why are people doing that?
Because it's how we organize ourselves as groups. We're naturally inclined to do that. As primates, we're a social species, and a species that naturally sorts itself into a social hierarchy.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out where we are in the social hierarchy. Where am I? Where are you? Where is that guy? I don't know you. And we're just sorting each other, trying to figure out where we all are. And the fastest, easiest way to do that is with signifiers. Do you have a badge? Do you have a crown? Do you have any emblem of authority or power or wealth or what? Do you have think about it like a wedding ring. When you see a woman, don't you look to see if she's married or a man?
Personally, I don't, but other people may.
Are you married?
Me personally. No, I'm not. I get that question all the time. It's interesting on my lives. Yeah.
Right. But so when you meet an attractive woman, you don't glance to see if she's spoken for?
Maybe I'm not at that age yet. Or maybe I just don't notice. But a lot of people do, don't they?
You don't bother to take a quick look and see if there's any point in flirting?
Oh, no. I assume people will tell me. I don't know. Well, I mean, the age of marriage has been going up. So, I mean, nobody that I interact with really, at least the places I go, there's not a whole lot of married folks there. But
you must be very young then.
I don't know. Maybe at the end I'll ask you to guess my age. But people do that though. Yes, in general. Maybe I don't, but people do that. And people have been doing it, and this is intrinsic to humanity. I mean, people have been wearing status symbols basically as far back as we've existed, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, then for your listeners, that's an easy one, because most people think when they hear that, they think, I don't look to see if someone has a badge or a crown, but a wedding ring's a good one.
Right.
When you meet someone and you think they're attractive, you often glance to see if they have a wedding ring on.
Maybe not even consciously, right? I mean,
yeah,
you might have not noticed, but your brain noticed.
Yeah, that's a social signifier.
Right.
Is that person married? Is there any point in continuing this flirty conversation?
Right. I mean, do you think social media has changed any of this at all? Because I mean, one observation I've made is that, I mean, young guys especially have started accessorizing a lot more. I mean, more so than when I was younger, right? I mean, traditionally, what do men wear? I mean, it's just a watch and a wedding ring, right? I mean, but now you kind of look around. I don't know, maybe you've noticed, maybe you haven't, but I mean, I've certainly noticed a lot more guys wearing necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and so on. More like the Gen Z generation.
Oh, my nephews are so intensely into accessories. One's a pen collector, one's a watch collector.
Right. I mean, it seems a lot more than it was in the past. I mean, do you think that do you have any thoughts on that?
One's 15.
Right. I mean, I think it's kind of generational. But my hypothesis is that, I mean, it's social media driven, right? I mean, when you're,
I like to think I influenced them, but
right. I'm sure that's probably part of it, right? But
no, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're right, and it's just generational.
I mean, have you thought about that at all, though? I mean, but people are seeing this on social media? I mean, does that kind of status symbol, search translate online? I mean, do you have any thoughts on where this is going in the future? I mean, is it is it a fad, or is this a permanent shift in our culture?
I think it's a combination of factors. So the idea that men didn't wear jewelry is absolutely a lie. That was only true in Western culture in the 20th century, and only after the Depression.
So this is an aberration.
This was an absolute aberration. Men in Western civilization, in Western culture, not wearing jewelry. In fact, for a lot of Western history, men wore more jewelry than women, it being a signifier of wealth and power. Who wears the pants in the economy?
Right.
That's who got to wear all the bling.
Right.
So of course it was men. Men, when you look at historical jewelry, in many periods, most periods, women's jewelry is really quite dainty. You put jewelry on women to show that you have money. This is my woman and I have iced her out, but not that much. So in most periods, men wore more jewelry than women, especially as you go further backward. And it was really the 20th century that balance of power started to flip-flop. And you know how people say you can look at the stock market and hemlines and watch them correspond? You've heard this?
I've heard it. I don't believe it, but I've heard it.
No,
go ahead.
Women's hemlines have always corresponded with the stock market. When times are good, skirts get short. And when money's tight, they get longer.
All right.
That's a real thing in fashion history. And it's also true, as women have gained more political power, they've worn more jewelry in the 20th century. You can actually watch as around the time women started demanding the vote, there's something called suffragette jewelry that was usually peridot and pearls and amethysts. And there's actually a big market for it. And women in general, even women who weren't suffragettes, started wearing more and more jewelry. But what's interesting is around the same time, not directly related, but indirectly, men wore less and less jewelry. And presumably it had more to do with the economics of the era, because shortly thereafter you had the giant crash and then the Depression, and everybody was toning it down. And men's accessories were harder to fake than women's accessories. Women started wearing fabric jewelry, like fabric flowers and things like that. And men didn't. You weren't going to fake a stick pin with fabric or with those sorts of enhancements or beads. And that might have been part of it, but women got more and more ornate and men just wore less and less and less. And it got even more intense with women's liberation. Women wore bigger and bolder accessories and men just wore nothing. And it got to the point where around the 80s, 90s, men just were down to a wedding ring and a watch.
Right.
And women wore everything, literally at once, like in a way that was maybe not necessarily even stylish, but it is, if you look at it critically, historically, very much a statement of economic and social power. I'm going to wear all of the jewelry simultaneously. I'm going to wear all of the necklaces and the earrings and the rings and the bracelets, and it's crazy.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it. It's a statement of burgeoning social and economic independence. And then men starting to wear all sorts of interesting accessories and jewelry again now, I don't think is related to I don't think it's related to economics or civil rights. I think it's a secondary factor. I think we've been talking about entirely Western European culture.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Insofar as the jewelry thing, right?
Yeah. Now, you asked about social media.
Right.
I think, I was talking to somebody yesterday about tattoos. In our parents, grandparents' generation, you couldn't have a tattoo and be part of normal, polite society.
Oh yeah, that's completely changed. That attitude has total about
Did you know
face.
I just found out that more than 3 tattoos 50 years ago was in the DSM. This is the big manual of psychiatric disorders, as a signifier of antisocial personality disorder.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Right? Not anymore.
Yeah.
The only people who had tattoos, other than, degenerates and psychopaths and murderers, were sailors. Everybody knew sailors had tattoos, like forever. Sailors have always had tattoos.
Right.
It just meant you were a sailor, probably.
Right. It's almost kind of a tribal thing in a lot of ways. I mean, could be
literally.
Yeah.
Interesting you use that word.
Right. Literally and figuratively sometimes.
Why would sailors have tattoos?
Right.
Sailors had tattoos because they went all over the world and they met everybody and they were like, hey, that's cool. Maybe I'll get one of those. Right. So think about social media, kind of like the whole world in a bottle. We're all looking at each other going, hey, that's cool. What have you got there? Maybe I want that.
Right. Right.
Right. So when the whole world in the last 20 or 30 years, not because of social media, but just multiculturalism within the US, as more people have grown up and moved here in the last 50 years, but grown up in the last 20 or 30 years here, and we've become a more diverse and interesting nation, you get a lot of different people. And that's why everybody has tattoos. And nobody thinks about it. Nobody looks twice, because that was a very Western European mindset that you can't have a tattoo or there's something very wrong with you unless you're a sailor, right? Well, the same is true for jewelry. I grew up in Southern California. I didn't know any white kids who had earrings, but I knew a lot of Latino kids who had earrings. Boys, I mean, they all had earrings and nobody cared. Right now it's like tattoos. So, and they were boys and they were wearing jewelry.
Right.
So different people have different rules and ideas about what are normal amounts and types of accessories, whether that's a tattoo or a pair of earrings or jewelry on men. And then when you add to that social media, where it's not just right here in the US, it's everywhere in the world, the whole world in a bottle. And we're all looking at each other going, well, what do you have? Hey, that's interesting. Maybe I want that. You're going to rapidly get everyone changing what they're doing. And I think that's why you're seeing with Gen Z, men going, well, I want jewelry. Those men have jewelry. These men have jewelry. I see a guy there wearing jewelry. I want some jewelry.
Right.
And girls going, those girls have tattoos. I want tattoos.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's actually a good way. I didn't think of that, comparing it to the tattoos. I mean, because that's certainly been a huge cultural shift as well. Yeah. I mean, I think I had read some stat recently that, I mean, maybe it's the majority or it's close to half at least. I don't remember exactly the number of millennials that have tattoos. I mean, compared to our parents' generation, I mean,
50
it's just
years
incredible.
ago, it was in the DSM.
Right.
It was a sign of antisocial personality disorder. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible cultural shift in just a very short amount of time. Yeah. So one thing that we talked about earlier, I can't let you go without talking about this, but we have to talk about the diamond scam. because you had mentioned diamonds earlier, and this is one of the anecdotes that you have in your book.
Which one? Because I told
Oh
one
yeah, it's
story
in both. It's in
Stoned,
both
and then
books,
I told
right?
a whole other story in The Truth About Lies.
Well, in Stone, you talk basically about how essentially diamonds are a creation of the advertising industry.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, one thing you learn is that the whole catchphrase "a diamond is forever." That was the slogan of the century, wasn't it? Because I mean, it was just such an incredible achievement for that industry. Real quick, what's up with diamonds? Essentially, I think what you say is that it's all just manufactured demand.
Yeah. So
what's up with that?
So real quick, diamonds, everyone's been taught that diamonds are incredibly rare and desperately valuable, but that value is manufactured. The value is based on the notion of scarcity. The value is based on the notion that there are only a handful of them on the planet, and if you get one, you're very lucky and you have to pay a fortune for it. And the truth is, you're paying a fortune for it because you agreed to. They're not rare at all. They're very common. They're just controlled. The supply used to be controlled almost entirely by this one company, De Beers. That's less true now than it used to be. But since this was all manufactured and everyone agreed to believe it, it doesn't even matter that they don't control the entire supply anymore. Everyone still agrees to go along with it because the other people, the other interests that control some of these diamond mines now, if they stopped going along with this story, the value would plummet. So they just continue with it. There was a diamond rush in South Africa, kind of like a gold rush. The difference being an actual rush only lasts a short amount of time, and then you've dug up all the gold, or you've dug up all the silver, or whatever. In this case, the rush never ended. They found out pretty quickly that it wasn't an actual rush. There are just a fuck ton of diamonds in South Africa. And whoops, not just South Africa, also in Canada, also in Brazil, also in India, also in Russia. They're everywhere. And we get better at mining them every year. They're just everywhere. And the people who did terrible things to control this supply when they thought it was a rush realized really quickly that if anybody ever found out how many there were, they would be worthless. So they just lied about it for a long time. They just lied and said, no, there really aren't that many. And we can't tell you how many there are. We don't have to, and we're not going to. And meanwhile, they engaged in this really strange practice called a sight holding, which was how they sold them. And what that meant was they chose who they would sell them to by inviting them once a year to buy their diamonds. Like, hey, Cartier, you're invited to the sight holding, meaning we've wrapped up a little parcel for you, and these are your diamonds. No, you don't get to pick. No, you can't see the other diamonds. No, you can't know what we're selling to Harry Winston or to anybody else. These are your diamonds. Take it or leave it. And if you leave it too many times in a row, you're never invited back, and we own all the diamonds. So nobody ever says no. Nobody ever doesn't show up. And that's how diamonds are sold. Crazy. The problem is, they were not allowed to do business in the US. And like it was all going really well for them for a while until World War II. And then World War II happened. And all of the money was in Europe and Russia. Russia actually had a fuck ton of money before the Bolshevik Revolution. Like they were a very rich country on the rise. They had like a prosperous middle class and an insanely wealthy, massive upper class. Kind of like China right now. And World War II happened, and when the dust settled, all the money was gone. Everybody was very poor. Russia had gone full communist, and a lot of the aristocracy, well, all the aristocracy in Russia, which was like a big part of their market, and a lot of the aristocracy was gone, and everybody was broke. So their market was gone, and all the money had moved, not just because everyone was broke, but it had reshuffled, and all the money had gone to the US. Problem was, the US, especially back then, more so than now, was not like Europe. In Europe, the money was clustered in small pockets of very rich people.
Mhm.
Back in the late 40s, early 50s, especially because of the New Deal and the GI Bill, the money was diffuse. It was all the money in the world. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it seemed like it. And it was spread out amongst everybody.
Right.
So everybody had extra money to spend, but not a lot. Enough for a car, enough for a washing machine, enough for a vacation, enough for a little diamond. But nobody wanted a diamond.
Right. There's no demands
There was
in
no
America,
demand.
really. Yeah.
Nobody in America wanted a diamond. It never occurred to anybody to buy a diamond. They had no reason to buy a diamond, and they could only buy a small diamond anyway. Couldn't buy a tiara. They couldn't buy the Hope diamond. They couldn't. And even if they could, they did some, quick, they didn't call it this at the time, but like consumer surveys of Americans right after the war. And they didn't like them. They thought they were ugly. They thought they were plain because they had no color. They were just like clear. And they kind of associated them with Europeans and royalty. And they did not like that association one bit. It was kind of a negative association. It was kind of an icky association to post-World War II America, which De Beers was very surprised to find out. And that all these people who had just been through World War II were like, Europe? Aristocrats? Nah.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Nah,
okay.
We're not into that. We'd rather go on like a road trip to see the Grand Canyon with our extra money.
Right.
And so their second problem was they were blocked from doing business in the United States because we had some very strong antitrust laws at that point, and they were a big, nasty monopoly. So they hired an advertising company called N.W. Ayer and Sons. And they said, we need some help with this. And they said, well, we don't know what we can do for you. You are blocked from doing business. And they said, oh, we don't need to do business. We just need you to make Americans want diamonds. And they said, you still can't sell them there. And they said, we don't need to sell them. Other people can sell them. We own all of them. We don't care where they buy a diamond, as long as they buy a diamond. Right. Someone will have bought it from us. And they went, oh, okay, that works. And they said, just invent a product and make people want it.
This is kind of the Mad Men era at this stage.
It was, well, Mad Men was the 60s. And
so maybe a little bit earlier.
Yeah, this was about 10 years before this. Yeah, and they said, invent a product, make them want it. And the product they invented was the diamond engagement ring. So that always surprises people because they think everybody always had those. Nobody had.
No, it's very recent, actually, in history, right?
It's as old. It's about exactly as old as the microwave oven. About exactly as old as the microwave. And people always go, my grandma had a diamond engagement ring. And I'll be like, your grandma got married right after World War II.
Right.
Like, and unless it was your great, great, great grandma, I'm not impressed. And if it was, that's very unusual because most people's great, great, great grandma didn't have an engagement ring at all. And that story might be a little bit of family lore. Maybe she had a ring, but she didn't have an engagement ring. Like, because people didn't. That wasn't a real thing. De Beers, or rather the company they hired, made up an origin story about the first diamond engagement ring and how it belonged to Mary of Burgundy, and Archduke Maximilian gave it to her. And it is a real ring and it is a real story. But he gave it to her father, and it doesn't look like you think it looks. It's kind of like shaped like an M, and it had more to do with a land deal. And
they very tenuous.
Yeah, they massaged this origin story quite a bit.
Right.
And the reason diamond engagement rings look the way they look is because they maximized this research where they were like, how much exactly can the average American man of the exact age, specifically at which they are most likely to propose, spend? So they figured out this is the age at which most men in the US will propose. How much money does he have? How much will he spend? Okay, X. How much will that buy? It'll buy a diamond this big. All right, a diamond this big looks best cut in this shape. how much is left over for the setting? Put it in this setting. Now, when you picture a diamond engagement ring, like classic diamond engagement ring, that's where it came from. It was a product that was completely researched for expense and how can we sell it to the most average person.
It's this whole idea that,
not like somebody designed it to be pretty.
right. It's this whole idea that guys
financial
have to,
vehicle.
this whole idea that guys have to spend, is it 3 months salary? Is it 4 months? What is it?
It started out as 2 months salary,
Right.
and then when it turned out they would spend it, they went, okay, let's see if they'll spend 3.
Yeah.
And they would, so they made the diamond a little bigger.
Right. So this is all just made up by some corporation, right? They told us that we had to do this, but now it's become ingrained in our
and then
consciousness.
there was some pushback,
right?
That the diamonds weren't big enough, so they made up that whole thing about cut, color, and clarity, and how size isn't everything, men. You know, it's important that you get the right color and the right cut and the right clarity, and they just flogged the hell out of that messaging so men would feel good about buying a smaller diamond. Like, this advertising agency invented the entire modern advertising model for advertising.
Right.
Over the course of about 5 to 10 years, all of it, from consumer research to product placement. They invented the whole, let's put them on movie stars in movies. Let's pay or trade with the studios to put the jewelry on the movie stars in the movies, or mention diamonds in their movies.
Right. The original influencer marketing, almost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That was invented. This whole thing was mostly invented by 2 women who worked at this advertising company, a woman named Frances Garrity and a woman named Dorothy Dignam. And one of them invented all of influencer marketing, and the other one was a copywriter who wrote the phrase "a diamond is forever," and like all of their copywriting and all of their taglines, and she invented, product placement, and you put it on red carpets. When somebody important gets engaged, somebody famous, let's, quietly talk to them first about, wouldn't you like a really big diamond? We'll give it to you.
Right.
But then we want to write about it in like the social pages when it happens, and take a big picture of you looking happy with your ring. And they did that, and people would read it and go, wow, this socialite got married. Look at that ring. And they indoctrinated high school students even. They had people go out under the guise of this being education, that they were talking about geology. And they, of course, mentioned diamonds. And, you're not really married if you don't have a diamond ring. And
right, of course.
And it worked so well that no one remembers. Like, by the time our parents were adults, they didn't remember that their grandparents didn't have engagement rings.
Right. I mean, the bullshit story has become real. And now it doesn't even matter. I mean, the lie has become reality. Yeah. Which actually I think is a great segue into the book you've most recently come out with, which is The Truth About Lies.
Yeah.
Now, the first book you say is about desire, right? Why do people value what they value? Now, the second book you say is why they believe what they believe.
Yeah.
Right. I think what is, I think, let's just start with
part of my growing canon of people. Why are they?
Yeah. Why do we behave this way?
Why are people?
People are kind of fascinating and strange in a lot of ways. I mean, what I think is what really hit me early on reading that book was, and I didn't know this, but we're biased to believe. I mean, people have an honesty bias.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what is that? Just real for our viewers, what is the honesty bias?
Well, people have all sorts of cognitive biases and different sort of pre-programmed sort of loopholes and backdoors in their thinking processes that they're not aware of. And just like a computer program, they're there as shortcuts and useful bits of code that make your brain function in a way that works in real time. But they can also fuck you up,
Right.
basically.
Right.
And an honesty bias is something that we all have. And what it is when you are presented with a piece of information, and I don't just mean like I tell you a fact, like today's Tuesday. I mean presented with a piece of information like you see a lamp sitting on a table in front of you. Presented in any way with any kind of piece of information. You look up and the sky is blue. You are pre-programmed to believe it's true, unless you have some compelling reason to believe it isn't, or you are presented with another conflicting piece of information.
Right.
You just believe what you're presented with.
Right. That's our default setting.
Yeah, you default to
Right.
believing what you're presented with is true. So when you see a lamp on a table, you believe it's a lamp and it's on a table. You look up, you see the sky's blue, you think the sky is blue. I say, hi, my name is Aja. You think my name's Aja. You don't think, I bet that woman's lying about her name.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, that I think is kind of fascinating in a way, because it would be impossible to go through life questioning everything like that, right?
You couldn't function. You wouldn't
Right.
make it out of your front door.
Right. You wouldn't be able to live a normal life, or a life at all.
You literally couldn't function. You couldn't function. I don't know if the floor's there. I don't know if my feet are there. You couldn't remotely function without an honesty bias. Because when you explain it to someone, they only think about the big things, like things people tell you. You think, oh, right, you'd lapse into paranoid delusions. But you actually couldn't function if you didn't believe the table in front of you was solid, and you didn't. That's why you have all of these mental heuristics and biases that they're there for a reason. They make your brain work, but they're also very exploitable.
Right. Right. By some unscrupulous figures. And I
By
think
anybody who's noticed they're there.
right.
And buyers are people who have noticed they're there, even if they don't know what they are. They've somehow experientially or through natural, let's call it talent, they've sort of noticed that people have tendencies or react, all of them, in certain ways to certain things, and they figured out how to work the knobs and dials.
Right, right. I mean, in the same style as your previous book, you kind of run through a few historical stories of different liars. I think, but one thing that really jumped out at me is the whole your section on gurus. Because for me, that's particularly relevant, because I always emphasize to people who view my content that I'm not a guru, right? I'm not an influencer or any of these other
that's not
terms.
what I meant by guru. It's
right. I mean, but there's
more like cult leaders.
Right. I mean, but there are so many. I mean, in the at least in the finance space, which is sort of where
those can be cult leaders.
Right, right, and that's where a lot of my work intersects with that space. And there are a lot of gurus, who people in investing or saying that they are going to, if you buy my program, here's how you 10x your money in a month or whatever.
There's so many in crypto.
Right. Reading your book, I was wondering, I wonder what she's going to mention, if she's going to mention crypto. And you did, actually.
I did.
We have similar thoughts. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll say, maybe I won't trigger all the crypto people in this show right here. But why is it that people are so vulnerable? I mean, essentially to bullshit artists, right? I mean, is it the desperation? I mean, what is it about these people that
Well,
that makes them just
you
throughout
just did it
history.
again. I spent 350 pages answering that question.
Yeah. I mean, right. Well, viewers listening to this, you should really just, read the book, honestly. But
I wrote in the very, very first lines of that book, I said, everybody asks themselves, everybody's been lied to. And then you wonder, why did I believe that? How could I believe that? But people tell you the truth all the time. And later, when it was obviously the truth, you don't think, why did I believe that?
Right. You don't question the truth. You only question it once you get screwed.
Nobody ever wondered. Everybody wonders why they believe a lie. Nobody ever wonders why they believe the truth. And so that was sort of my question was, why do you believe anything? Because there really is no difference between believing a lie and believing the truth. The question is, why do people believe things?
Right. And one question that I had kind of, going through reading the book was, given our honesty bias, how do we go through life, or how do we not be fooled, right? Because it's not like, I mean, you can't, you hear that phrase, question everything, right? I mean, that's kind of, that's out there, but you really can't. You can't question everything. I mean, it's
really
impossible.
Can't.
Right.
And honesty bias is just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of lies you can't not fall for. I mean, chapter 2 was about the kind of lies you can't not fall for. All you can do is avoid them. Right. And so each chapter is about a different kind of lie and how it works. And I mentioned in one chapter, I think it was the one on hoaxes, that everybody's susceptible to some, like, particularly susceptible.
Right. We're all vulnerable in some way or
another. Some kind of lie, and it's hard. I think it's hard for most people to tell, or maybe they know themselves really well to know what it is for them. But if you think about people, you usually know what it is for them. Like, somebody who just can't stop with the snake oil. Like, they just won't stop with, like, wellness treatments and just bullshit cures. And
right.
Like, yeah, I have a sibling who's just such a hypochondriac, and and they believe every nonsense, like, from supplements to just, I'm gonna think myself well. And it's like, well, thank God there's nothing wrong with you, or I'd be worried. Like, and some people can't walk past a casino or a card game, or even though they know it's rigged, because that's the lie they fall for.
Right.
And I even outed myself in that. And I was like, so here's the one I fall for. Like, and I know it's bullshit. And every time, head first, right down that rabbit hole. I said, I am such a sucker for hoaxes. I just can't stop looking for the Loch Ness Monster. Literally, I keep paying and getting on boats every time I'm in Scotland. I just love sea monsters so much. It's why I stay off of Reddit, because I'm sure somebody would sell me something crazy, figuratively speaking. Like, I'm not going to go looking.
Right. I don't know if you ever seen the X-Files. It's that old poster in Fox Mulder's office, I want to believe, and it shows, like, a flying saucer.
It's true.
A lot of people have probably seen that. Right.
That's it exactly. Just, for some reason, there's something in me that wants to believe crazy things. But I know that about myself, so I don't, particularly on the internet, I don't go to neighborhoods where they're selling crazy things, because I might accidentally believe one of them. Right.
So you kind of have to know yourself then if you're going to avoid being bamboozled. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It helps. If you have a problem with gambling, don't go to places where there's gambling. Like.
Yeah. I've kind of resigned myself to the fact. I mean, I like to think I'm rational, but I think part of being rational is knowing also that at some point you're gonna get bullshitted, and
Yeah.
you're gonna fall for it. And it's just, try to limit the 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 damage as much as possible, right? I've kind of accepted that, but you always end up feeling stupid after you get scammed anyway, and regardless.
Yeah, I try to keep it in the realm of the harmless, like getting my palm read, looking for the Loch Ness monster, but I'm definitely not getting on 4chan anytime soon. Like, you just have to know what you're likely to get tricked into, and
Right.
that helps a lot.
Right. Yeah. Especially for people who are in we see so the financial world is just saturated with this right now. Especially when you get on places like really everywhere. Discord, TikTok. It's now it's just really in the open. Uh, and really no different than anything they were doing with. You talk about snake oil. The literal snake oil from 150 years ago, and but the tactics are no different. Really nothing's
No,
changed when you
no,
think
not at
about
all.
it.
Not even a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah. And that was something that I tried to show in each chapter. Each chapter was about a different kind of lie, a different kind of con, because that's what a con is. It's an active
Right.
lie. And so the chapter about snake oil started out about actual snake oil, which was a real thing that people sold during America's first opioid epidemic back in the early 1800s.
Right.
And I explained patent medicines, and they were just crazy things like snake oil. And I went all the way through to Purdue Pharma and showed how nothing changed. It works exactly the same way. And this lie, this con, the cognitive biases that it exploits, they're identical. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right. Right.
We're in a second opioid epidemic, and it all works exactly. The advertising exploits something called the illusory truth effect and the mere exposure effect, which is basically when you, just to really gloss over it and put it in a few words, if you repeat something often enough, people believe it's true.
Right.
That's how it works. And that's how drug advertising works. You just say it over and over and over again. And even if they knew it was bullshit the first time they heard it, the 150th time they heard it,
It has an effect, even if you don't realize it.
no,
Yeah.
it feels true.
Right.
It
Right.
feels true. And it feels trustworthy. And maybe I should ask my doctor about meltable fentanyl tablets, and maybe I am sick. And it's a real thing, and it's really scary.
Right.
And the people advertising drugs didn't do it by accident. They know that. That's why they say, ask your doctor if you're having blah, blah, blah. Because the
Right.
150th time they say, ask your doctor if you're having pain in your lower back, you start to think maybe you're having pain in your lower back. And
Right.
maybe you should ask your doctor for some fentanyl.
Right. Right. Do you think that as far as finance goes, YouTube must be tracking me. They know I'm into that. So every time I'll always get an ad talking about, how X crypto product or whatever it is, I'm going to 10X my money in a month or whatever, or whatever, and, but I see it's just repeated all the time. And do you think that people are, the more they're exposed to that, the more that they start to believe, oh, hey, maybe I really
Yes,
can do that.
that's exactly how the mere exposure
Right.
effect works.
Right. It's just so interesting.
You see it over and over and over, and it becomes real to you.
Right.
It
Right.
starts to feel trustworthy. And if you see someone saying it over and over and over, that person saying it becomes associated with the message. This is where it gets tricky, but really creepy. The message not only becomes trustworthy, the person saying it becomes associated with the message. And the message, having become trustworthy, extends that halo of trustworthiness to the person saying it, and the person saying it becomes trustworthy as well and begins to feel like an expert.
Right. That's interesting.
That's the illusory truth effect. It takes on the illusion of truth.
Right. I mean, because I think this is something you emphasize, is that once you start to believe the lie, it's very difficult to then extricate yourself from it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because then, I think a lot of people know about, or they've at least heard of things like confirmation bias. You know, you discard evidence that contradicts your opinion. But I think it really goes far beyond that. I mean, the more people try to disprove your belief, the more strongly you believe it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because, when people talk about confirmation bias, they usually are misusing the term, and really
Right.
what they're saying is that person's an asshole and they don't believe me. That's really how they're using it, and that's not what it means. What it means is you've told someone something that fundamentally threatens a belief they have, and that belief is sort of a load-bearing belief. It's structurally necessary for them. It supports a lot of other beliefs, kind of like Jenga. And if you take it away, a lot of things are going to collapse.
Right. Their whole worldview crashes. But
a lot of other beliefs become undermined.
Right.
And they can't let that happen. Not consciously, but unconsciously. They can't let that happen. So they will sacrifice or distort many other beliefs to protect a load-bearing belief, any of a number of load-bearing beliefs, but in this case, the one you're attacking, because it's structurally necessary. Not, people always go, well, they have a cognitive bias, and that just means they're stupid and they just won't believe me or be rational.
Right.
And that's not what it means. It means they literally they built this house wrong, and they can't be convinced otherwise without. So there's no arguing someone out of a belief that has become load bearing.
Right.
It's not really feasible.
Right. I mean, and that's kind of why people ask me all the time about something like, okay, well, I'll trigger the crypto people a little bit with this one, but people ask me all the time what I think about crypto, and at first I'd kind of say why I don't believe in it, and I'd list the reasons why, and so on and so forth. Try to my rational, or at least, but from my point of view, my rational argument. But eventually, I you sort of figure out there's no point, because people have already made up their mind one way or the other. And I mean, nothing I say is going to convince them.
If somebody sold their house,
right?
If somebody sold their house to buy crypto, and then their wife left them over it, and just they've completely changed their entire life, and then you go, crypto's a pyramid scheme.
Right.
It's become a load-bearing belief for them, and this is not going to be a productive conversation.
Right. I mean, it is a pointless conversation, as I have come to realize. But part of me almost thinks, right, like, is it going to be something like diamonds at some point, where, yeah, it's total. Maybe it's bullshit, maybe it isn't, but at some point, what does it matter anyway? Because the belief has now become reality, right? Crypto.
I was pretty sure Bitcoin was a pyramid scheme 4 years ago.
Right.
When I started writing this book.
Right. You're not so sure now. At
this point.
Or its belief becomes reality.
No. At this point, I'm hoping it's a pyramid scheme and not something worse.
That would be the better outcome.
Best case scenario, it's a
Right.
pyramid scheme. It might have mutated into something worse. But when the Venezuelan government gets on board with something, that something is not good.
Right. I mean, yeah, so many grifters have been now attracted to it. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's almost unfalsifiable in a lot of ways. Which is why I say, it's really a religion at this point. I mean, isn't it? There's a lot of aspects of it that are quite similar. Right. But I think
people have definitely made money on it.
Right.
I can't deny that.
Correct.
But
right.
Speculation is not currency.
Right.
And so there's that. And I mention it fairly briefly in one chapter, it's like a page maybe. And I just make, one of the points I make is that it's not currency. Not currency.
No, by definition, by any reasonable definition, right.
It's absolutely not currency. And so, speculation isn't currency, and it's never going to be currency. And that seems to that makes some of the Bitcoin enthusiasts angry, but it's not. And back when I wrote that, it's changed since then. But back when I wrote that, it just went up and up and up and up and up. And I said, that makes it more like a tulip bulb than anything else. But since then, it's had some downswings and upswings and downswings and upswings. So that situation has changed. But I still think it's a pyramid scheme. Because you know who owns most of the Bitcoin in the world?
That's a very small percentage of people.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a pyramid.
Right. I mean, that's literally almost the definition, right? I mean, all the benefits are accruing to the people at the top.
All the benefits in the world are accruing to about 6 people.
Right.
And only because everyone else keeps buying it. Correct.
I mean, do you think it's one of those things? I mean, can it go on forever? I mean,
no.
I mean, something like not like something. What if it's something like gold, right? I mean, gold. I mean, you could argue that maybe it has some intrinsic value, right? I mean, it doesn't tarnish. It has maybe historically.
No. It has a lot of intrinsic value. There are a lot of things you can't do without gold, and it has nothing to do with jewelry.
Right.
It has technological applications.
Right. It has industrial
medical
applications. Right. But you don't see Bitcoin as being analogous at all. No.
No, I think blockchain's really interesting technology.
Right.
And I think it's
for sure.
Bitcoin, I'm sorry to anyone whose head explodes.
Oh man, we're already triggering them. We're already triggering.
It's a hustle. It's a pyramid.
Right.
You know what? I stand by it. It's a hustle. It's a pyramid scheme, guys. There are like 6 people who own most of it, and it's only valuable because everybody else keeps buying it and freaking out about it.
Right. And while we're maybe just to close out that line of thought, why is it that you do talk about this in your book, but why is it that a pyramid can't last forever? I mean, why can't it just continue forever? I mean, mathematically speaking, right? It's there's actually you actually could prove that it will eventually will collapse.
Yeah, there's math, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. But
I won't make you do that right now. But qualitatively,
I could do the numbers. I could prove my math cred here. I do have a pencil, but it's the same principle by which if you take a sheet of paper, like printer paper, and you fold it in half and fold it in half and fold it in half and fold it, I think it's 14 times maybe, and it'll reach the moon.
Right. I mean, it's kind of a mind-blowing fact, right?
Yeah.
That's a mind fuck.
That's exponents. Like
right.
You only have so many times you can keep adding layers to think about the shape of a pyramid, right? The tip of a pyramid is as big as the tip of a pencil. Think about the Great Pyramid at Giza, right? Tip of a pencil. By the time you get to the base is almost the size of, what is it, like 15 city blocks? It's not that tall, guys. Like exponents. You can't keep adding layers of investors until you get more people than are on the planet.
Right. Mathematically impossible.
Mathematically
Yes.
speaking,
So just
you run out of investors quickly for a pyramid.
right. I mean, for anybody listening, there's something to ponder. And I mean, you've been very generous with your time. So I think maybe we'll end it here. And just before we sign off, I want to again, link will be in the description of this video. Aja's books. I'm gonna read the title because I have, just so we're clear here. But her first book, Stoned: Jewelry, Obsession, and How Desire Shapes the World. A very good read, very entertaining. Again, if you follow me, I think you'll really enjoy that book. And her most recent book, which just came out earlier this year, is The Truth About Lies: The Illusion of Honesty and Evolution, which again, also a very good book. I own copies of both of them myself, and I greatly enjoyed them. And this is a great conversation. I'm really glad you came on. Hopefully we'll get to do it again sometime. Whatever. I'm very much looking forward to whatever you do next.
Thank you.
All right. And that's it, guys. And again, if you don't know who I am Mike Berner, the creator and host of the Tycoonist, a business and finance publication. Again, links to my work below. Be sure to get on the email list and follow for more content. All right. Peace out, guys.